My name is Russ Perry. I oversee adult ministry here at Cypress Valley Bible Church. Once in a while, I get the big stage, and today's the day. I'm glad you're here to take part in this. I guess it's kind of a threesome. We took a look at Solomon the last couple of weeks, and we learned from him that he did it right regarding the whole dating thing and the courtship thing and the engagement thing and the wedding day. We talked about the wedding night. And here we have this amazing model in Solomon. Not only that, but he gave us Ecclesiastes. He gave us most of the book of Proverbs and the Song of Solomon, of course. And so the guy is a rock star, and I'm a fan. So if it seems like I'm throwing him under the bus this morning, I'm not, because I love this guy. I can't wait for an appointment with him in the kingdom. I'm sure I'll have my secretary call his secretary and see if we can't do lunch, because I want to talk to him and learn more about him, because what I'm going to share with you is off the charts amazing about a man. But he had a slow fade. And in the lyrics, which are by Casting Crown, we see this: thoughts invade, choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. And I fear that that is what happened with Solomon, a slow fade. And so we're going to unpack his life this morning, and in snapshots. There's just way too much to cover, but we're gonna take a look at his life this morning. Let's begin here. Solomon's smart start. So this is what the Bible tells us in 1 Kings. The Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask, what shall I give you?" Wow, how about that? This is a blank check, Solomon. You write in whatever it is you want, and I'll grant it. And so this is what Solomon said: "Give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" Oh my, what a fantastic answer to God's invitation. Tell me what you want. Just tell me what you want. This is how he answered. And so the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And why not? What an amazing thing to ask for. God was impressed. If God could be impressed, he was impressed with Solomon's answer. If God could be the host on The Price is Right, he would have said, "Ding, ding, 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 Johnny, tell him what he's won," because this is what he won. God said to him, "Because you have asked this thing and have not asked long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I have done according to your words. See, I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there's not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. You, sir, are one of a kind. There's no one who's going to be like Solomon." What a thing to be said about a man, because he answered God in the way that God was pleased about. "And as a bonus, I'm going to give you what you didn't ask for. I've also given you what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all of your days." And boy, was that the truth. As a matter of fact, it was common knowledge in the ancient days that Solomon was smarter than the average bear. And so I'll just give you one example of this. The Queen of Sheba traveled 1,200 miles. This is without vehicles. This is without a monorail. This is on camelback. 1,200 miles from what is present-day Yemen all the way up to Jerusalem, where she would pick the brain of Solomon. And she came away, the Bible tells us this, I heard about you, but it didn't come to half of what is true about you. I'm amazed at how your servants love you and the people that you are the king over, how God's blessed you, the wisdom that you've got. she just went on and on, gushed, and all the kings of the area would do that. They were, I guess in this sense, owned by Solomon. God gave him a 40-year peaceful reign. And so all the other nations that were around them would pay taxes to the treasury of Solomon. And so he had everything he could possibly want. So let's take a look at what he did with what God gave him, Solomon's wisdom on display. Now, the very first thing that he was to do, and he was told this by his father David, who was the king before him, you need to build the temple because God won't let me build it, but I have gathered the things that you'll need. Here are the plans. Now make it happen. And so here's what the Bible tells us. And it came to pass that he began to build the house of the Lord. So Solomon built the temple and finished it. Notice there's lots of verses between 1 and 14 tells us what that was like. But he finished it in 7.5 years, and this might be what it looked like. This is an artist's rendition of Solomon's temple. It was an amazing structure, and there was no expense spared. He spent a lot of money on it, but he had a lot of money, and I'm going to show that to you here in just a moment. And the Lord said to him, I have heard your prayer. The prayer that the Lord is talking about is the dedication prayer that Solomon did after the temple was built. And boy, was it a great prayer. He just told everybody, hey, this temple can't contain God. That's like his footstool. He's vast. He's everywhere all at once. What I've done for him is nothing. But as long as we're going to worship him, he said he put his name here if we would do this. And God said, I've heard your prayer, and here's what God said about that. Now, if you walk before me as your father David walked. Now, notice that I've highlighted now if. This is a conditional contract. It's a conditional covenant. If you'll do this, then I'll do that. Solomon was a believer. He had already come to faith in Jesus. I'm sure his dad, David, talked about that and led him to Christ, probably himself. But he had other seers, which are prophets, and they would tell him about Jesus as well. So he had already come to faith. But God said, I want to do some amazing things in and through you, but you need to know something up front. If you walk before me as your father David walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded you. If you'll do that, then I will establish your throne over Israel forever. I'm going to show you a picture of what that throne may have looked like. It's pretty overwhelming, but everything about Solomon is overwhelming. I especially love these solid gold lions on either side of the steps. There are 12 of them, probably representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Ecclesiastes will tell us that he had men singers, he had women singers, he had all kinds of choirs, he had all kinds of musical instruments. Nothing that he put his mind to was impossible for Solomon. So this is kind of what that looked like. And Queen of Sheba saw this and said, oh my, I can't even take it in. So we move on. And God is continuing to speak and says, but if you or your sons at all turn from following me and do not keep my commandments and my statutes, which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then this is what you can expect. Then I will cut off Israel from the land. So Solomon knew up front what the conditions were. He absolutely understood them. So let's talk about the wisdom of Solomon and some of the things that he was able to accomplish. He said in Ecclesiastes, I made my works great. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. I'd made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees. So Solomon was an expert in botany. He understood all of this. He knew what made all this tick. And what he was able to accomplish was amazing. But not only that, he was an expert in archaeology, in architecture, in literature, in zoology. He talks a lot about animals. He talks about all kinds of things through his writings. And I told you that we have many of them, Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, and we also have the Proverbs. So this may have been what that looked like. He was famous for terracing. So he used every bit of land he could to build the things that he enjoyed doing. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were before me in Jerusalem. This is what perhaps that looked like. I mean, everywhere. And it took a lot to take care of Solomon and his entourage. As a matter of fact, each of the tribes, once a year for a whole month, were supposed to take care of the king and all the people that he was to feed. And it was an enormous task. And so all of these had to be grown throughout the year. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasure of kings. I acquired male and female singers, musical instruments of all kinds. This is what that kind of looked like. The Bible tells us in Solomon's reign, silver, which now goes for about $23 an ounce, were like rocks on the ground. Pick up a rock, and that's how plentiful silver was. Everybody had silver. Everybody loved Solomon and how he ruled and his reign. Gold, second nature. He had tons of it. Everything he did was overlaid with gold. And you just read about the temple and how much gold is in that temple. He had so much gold because the people that paid tribute or taxes to him would have to pay for it in gold. And so he had tons, and I'm talking tons of gold, literal tons of gold. And so he said this was true of my reign. So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Now, Solomon tried it all. He says that. He says, everything my heart desired, I let myself do it. So if he needed to laugh one night, he'd bring court jesters in, he'd bring comedians in, and they would entertain him. He even says this, I needed to try my wine, and I needed to see what being drunk felt like. And so he did that too. And he said, the whole time that's happening, my wisdom also stayed with me. So if there's ever a guy that we can relate to, it's him. And I love this guy. And I can't wait to meet him. And I can't wait for you to meet him too, because he has much to teach us. So let's talk about Solomon's slow fade, because he started off great. But he shall not multiply horses for himself. Now, I'm taking you back to something that Moses said. And Solomon would have known this. As a matter of fact, I'm quite sure David, his dad, would have said, Solomon, you got to make sure you understand what Moses is saying here, because this is how kings are to operate. You are not to multiply horses for yourself, neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. So he's already kind of going south on this one. This one might intrigue you, and it might intrigue you to know that these are the ruins of Solomon's stables. And he has these in 3 different parts of Israel. And in that day, the most awesome offense there was for an army were chariots led by horses. And he had a ton of horses. Scholars tell us over 4,000 in different cities, and had the most magnificent stalls for them. He had all kinds of chariots, up around 1,200 chariots. Now, you might think, what was wrong with that? Because in the previous verse in Deuteronomy, Moses says, I don't want kings to do this. But he did it. And if you've got a stable full of horses and you've got the best army there is, and you've got gold and silver that you can't even count, then you might drift from God. Because why would you need God? And God knew this, Moses knew this, and I'm sure Solomon was reminded of this, not only probably from his dad, but from the prophets of the day whose job it was to help him spiritually. So he didn't do well there, but here's where he really messed up. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, the women of the Moabites, Ammonites, termites. I'm just kidding about termites. Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. He had wives from all of these people. Now, I'm just going to pick on one of these people groups, the Moabites. The Moabites had a detestable god called Chemosh. And Chemosh was a huge brass guy with a big belly that was hollowed out, and his hands were like this. And they would start a fire in the belly of Chemosh, and it would become white hot. And they would lay a child on those hands and literally sizzle that child to death. And you go, that's appalling. How could that happen? And how could Solomon be involved in that? I mean, we already know that God's appeared to him one time, but God's about to appear to him a second time. And you would think that if all people, the smartest guy on the planet, would know this is not good. This is not good. But this is what Solomon was into. Now notice the influence, because he loved many foreign women. So it goes on to say, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love. And I know you're sitting there going, how in the world could that have happened? But it did. It did happen. And he goes on to say, and he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines or mistresses, and his wives turned away his heart. Now, if you're like me, you can in 2 words summarize what you're thinking. Seriously, Solomon? 1,000 wives? 1,000 women in your harem? I got one in my harem that I'm not sure I can take care of the way she ought to be taken care of. 1,000 women? And notice what they did. They turned his heart away from God. Now, the lesson for us in this is that we can be influenced. Let's just admit that we can be influenced by others around us. We can be influenced by a relationship. Someone that, I didn't meet this girl in church. I met her in a bar, but I bet that'd be okay. And do you think that she's going to have great influential skills on you if you met her there? Probably not. Probably not. But you can see, and all of us could probably say, yeah, I've been influenced before too with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And yeah, my walk with God really wasn't that great during that time because they influenced me wrongly. Well, this is what's happening 1,000 times to Solomon. It's sad. His wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. Now, David wasn't perfect. You know David. David committed adultery. David was involved in murder. David called for a census, you may not know this, in order to number the people, and God was not happy with that decision, and 70,000 people died because of David and his ordering that census. So David didn't have it all together. David had multiple wives, nowhere near what he did, but he had 6 anyway. But David loved the Lord, and God knew that, and Solomon was moving away from what his dad loved to what he loved, because you saw earlier that he clung to these women in love. Now watch this. He was not loyal to the Lord his God. That is a very kind way of saying what several other interpretations or translations have said. He was not loyal. He was not fully devoted. He was half-hearted, and he did not fully follow. These are just what some of the the translations I read about that particular verse, and it helps us get a feel of how far he had drifted. Now, I want to show you a passage that answers this dilemma we have from the New Testament. It's found in Hebrews chapter 2, and the author to the Hebrews says, "Therefore we must give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard." Solomon heard lots. Not only had he heard lots, but he knew a lot. I mean, he knew God in a very personal way that you and I will never experience because God appeared to him twice. But the things that we have learned, we dare not neglect or ignore. We must give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard. Now, let me say this about you, okay? Many of you have been here for a long time. I'm convinced that you have forgotten more about the Bible than most people will ever know. I'm convinced of that. You've been so well taught that you've probably forgotten more about the Bible than most people will ever know. Are you accountable for that? Sure are. To whom much is given, much is required. We will answer for what we know and what we've been taught. Are we putting that into practice is what the author to the Hebrews is saying. Don't forget what you have learned. Because what could happen? What's the downside? We could drift away. And that's what was happening to Solomon. He had drifted away because of the influence of his wives. Now, when I think of drift, there's lots of things that come to mind, but I was thinking this week, what could I share with them that they would connect with? So let's say you got a vacation coming up this summer. You've booked a condo at the beach. You're all excited. You drive that long drive down to Florida, and you get there, and you check in, and you just can't hardly wait to peel off those clothes and get in the swimsuit and get to the beach. And so you do that. You put your stuff down, take a mental look. There's my condo. Okay, here's my stuff. I'll be right out here. So you go out there, and an hour later, going, okay, it's time to pack it in. I feel like I'm getting a little sunburned. I think I'll head back to the condo. And you look up and you go, where's my condo? Well, it was right there when I came in. And you look this way and, oh, there it is. I have drifted and I didn't even know that that was happening. And this is what happens to us sometimes spiritually. We can drift and not even know we're drifting. And the author to the Hebrews is saying, don't do that. Don't forget what you know, because you could drift away. And then he goes on to say, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? Now, this salvation is not talking about salvation going to heaven kind of salvation. That's by believing in Jesus for everlasting life, something which Solomon did. He's talking about reward. So I'm going to put that word in there. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a reward? And since you know God wants that for you, he's grooming you to be rewarded in the future so that you can serve him in the kingdom. That's what rule and reign is about, is serving Jesus in the kingdom, serving his people by serving him. We don't want to neglect that because God values that so much. If we say, not interested, let someone else do that, I'm just going to be glad to be there, you're neglecting this great reward. And we've been taught that reward means that the closer you are to Jesus here, the closer you are to Jesus there in the kingdom. And you want to be close to him in the kingdom. And he's saying, don't neglect that, ignore that. Don't put that on hold and be influenced by whatever influences you. For Solomon, it was his women. So here's Solomon's sad ending. And I hate this about Solomon, but I want to share something with you I think that might be helpful. So the Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned from the Lord, God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Wow, you could see, okay, once, maybe, but twice, God showed up and said, look, this is how things need to roll out. And if I'm Solomon, I'm taking notes. But he did not follow those notes. He commanded him concerning this thing God had, that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord had commanded. Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this and have not kept my word which I commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant. And that's what happened at the end of Solomon's life. No longer all the 12 tribes together. They were divided. That's what became the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And you just read about the kings, and it was an absolute train wreck after Solomon. One thing after another, and boy, these guys, most of them did not follow God or Jesus. They sadly neglected him and ignored him. This is what happened after Solomon's reign. So I had feelings about Solomon these last couple of weeks that I've been looking at his life. My first feeling was sad. I'm sad for him because he is not included in the great Hall of Fame chapter, Hebrews 11. Guess who is in there? Samson. He was a womanizer. He was a he-man with a she problem in a big way. But he's included in Hebrews chapter 11. Why? Because Samson finished well. He finished faithfully. God included him in that chapter, but not Solomon. Not Solomon. And it's hard to take in that he's not included there. And so I was sad for him, and I'm sad for anybody that follows Solomon's example. And then I got mad, found myself mad. I'm mad because the idea of ruling with Christ in the way of reward is so seldom taught in mainline denominational churches. Maybe you grew up in a church that never talked about that. Maybe they just talked about, I'm going to heaven when I die, and that's it. We're all equal in heaven. We're playing harps and floating on clouds. If you think that's what heaven's like, you've got to, I'm going to say you got another thing coming, because that's not what heaven's like at all. But I'm mad because people won't learn from Solomon's example, and they will bring sadness upon themselves at the judgment seat of Christ when their life is evaluated and your role for eternity is handed out. I'm mad because that happens. But then I'm glad. I found myself glad because God included this story. Now, he didn't have to. He could have said, Solomon, I'm just going to bury this because it's dirty laundry. It's skeletons in your closet, and no one needs to know about that. But he didn't do that. He put it out there for you and I to learn from and say, I cannot be Solomon in this part of my life. I just can't. I'm all about asking God for wisdom, and he says that we should ask for wisdom, and he'll give it to all men liberally and not holding back. So he'll give that to us, not the kind of wisdom that Solomon had. But I'm glad God included the story, because you know what I love about God? He is honest. He's just honest. He's not going to cover up the dirt. And he did that with Esau. He did that with Lot. He did that with King Saul. Now he's doing it with Solomon. He's exposing the warts. He's showing us that these guys didn't have it all together. Yeah, they're included in the Bible, but their stories are to help us avoid what they did wrong. And so I'm glad that God is honest. And sometimes he's brutally honest. It's brutal, the kind of things you read about in the Bible. So I experienced all of these last week. And I just wanted to say to you this morning that we need to learn from the life of Solomon about what to do and about what not to do, because we could go there. Well, none of us are ever going to have 1,000 wives. I get that. But we can be influenced by people to where we're influenced away from God and find ourselves in a drift. And if we're drifting whenever Jesus comes back in the rapture, or we're drifting at our time of death, then Yes, we're going to be in the kingdom, but we will not fare as well as what we could have if, in fact, we had taken his word seriously. And that is included in my bottom line, and here it is. To avoid a slow fade and a sad ending, stay focused on God and his word. It's a focus, and it requires effort on our part. And it's surrounding ourselves with people who can help us and not hurt us. It involves some discipline and obedience on our part. But look who it is we're being obedient to, the one who knows us most and loves us best. He wants what's in our best interest, always does. And so he wants us to rule with him in the kingdom, but to avoid a slow fade and a sad ending, stay focused on God and his word. Now, I hope that you'll consider that this week and take a look at his life. It's a fascinating journey if you'll just look up the life of Solomon. And it's found in several places, but you will be amazed at the kind of man he was. Even Ecclesiastes, even though he at the end of the day, he says, you know what? The whole thing's meaningless. It's a chasing of the wind. He's basically saying, if your eyes are not on God, then all this life has to offer ain't all that. That's what he's saying in Ecclesiastes. Fascinating book. So next week, we're going to look at the seekers. Bob is going to share a series with us from the Gospel of John. I hope that you're here for that. And I will be right up here to visit with anyone that I don't know yet. And if you'd like to come visit with me and introduce yourself, I had that last service. As a matter of fact, I'll just share this with you real quickly. A girl walked up to me. I didn't recognize her. She said, you don't recognize me, do you? I said, no, I sure don't. And she said, I was your nurse in the hospital. This is when I had COVID, and I thought I was going to die. I couldn't catch a breath. She was my nurse. And every day, very encouraging, and she was one of the people that God used to save my life. And I thought, wow, you're here this morning. What a cool thing. So I'd love to meet you if I don't know you. And or if you have a question about what we talked about, love to visit with you about that. In the meantime, let's pray, and we'll see you back next week. Father, thanks so much for Solomon. And thank you for your sharing his life with us. We can learn so much about what to do and about what not to do. And I just pray that on that day when we face you, that we'll be way, way more glad than sad. And I pray that you might use his story to encourage us to stay the course and to fight the good fight and look forward to the day when Jesus will say to us, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. I will make you ruler over much. Enter into the joy of the Lord. We long for those words and pray that today is a step in that direction. And for how you'll answer, we'll give you thanks. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for coming.